and I welcome you to the YouTube channel. And I'm going to ask my audience if you would please subscribe to the channel. It does help us keep everything going. It doesn't cost you anything. It's very free. So just click on that subscribe button, and I do appreciate it. My guest today has had several years of Bigfoot research, but also several years of some form of Bigfoot knowledge, encounter, whatever. So we're going to hear all about his story today. And I am speaking now with Jay Keaton. So welcome to the show, Jay.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I understand that you have been out in the field. You are a boots on the ground kind of guy. And so what got you started in this whole avenue to start with?
Well, I'm a tribal member. I am Shawnee and Catawba, and we are well acquainted with the woods and with our ancestry and with the lore of the past and everything. But we really hadn't engaged this until pretty much about 20 years ago or so. And it started off with a fellow that I knew who wanted to hunt on me. I live here in eastern Kentucky, and we have a very large tract of ground, around 1,200 acres here. We got 6 or 7 miles of cliff lines, big cliffs that go all through our property that really kind of surround us, actually, and with caves and waterfalls. I mean, it's very epic looking. It's not like what you would picture in eastern Kentucky, but and there's a waterway that runs through us. The Blackwater Creek runs through us to the Licking River, and the Licking River goes to the Ohio. And I had a fellow wanting to hunt on me about 20 years ago or so, and he was a Marine Corps veteran, a combat veteran, and he wanted to camp and then hammock camp the day before things or the day before deer season, and he wanted to go down into the woods and hammock camp to be closer to his deer stand. Well, my dad happened to be on the porch that night, and it was the night before season, and he was drinking a cup of coffee while all of us boys was in the house, and he comes in and he has this look on his face. He just was like maybe a mix between startled, puzzled, concern kind of a look, and very real. Okay, this is all very real. We're well acquainted with the woods. We're very adept at woodland creatures and sounds that they make and such. And my dad, we used to go moose hunting in Canada. I mean, we're very well acquainted with these things. And for him to come in and look like this, and he says, "Did you hear that?" And we looked at each other and said, "Well, hear what, Dad? What is it that you're wanting us to hear?" He said, "You didn't hear that." And we said, "No." He said, "It shook the windows." I said, "Well, what was it?" He said, a very curious thing to me. He said, "I don't know." And for my dad to say that was, to me, the red flags, the ears perked up. And I said, "Well, what do you mean you don't know?" Because Dad knew everything. It was one of those things. He knew every sound every animal made and why they made it. And he said, "Well, it sounded kind of like a man, but yet kind of like an animal." He said, "But the lungs on this thing," he goes, "is more than a man could do." I said, What did it do?" I said, "Make the sound that it made." I said, "Are you sure it wasn't a bear or a cat?" Or he goes, "No, no." He said it made a roar like a man, and then it got higher pitched as it went along to like a scream. And he said he was so concerned. He said, "We need to pack up and get on the ATVs and drive up to where Jimmy is parked with the camper and go see him." Well, by this time, it was well after dark. And I told him, I said, "Well, Jimmy's plan was to be down in there hammock camping." And my dad had this look on his face like, "Well, I bet you he's not down there." So we went up to the camper, and Dad knocked on the door, and he yelled from inside, this combat veteran. And he says, "Who is it?" And my dad says, "It's Lowell and Jay." So we went in, and he had himself barricaded in the back of his camper with his rifle. He was very scared. And he said, "Did you hear that?" And my dad looks at him and said, "Well, that's why we're here." He goes, "I heard it." He goes, "Jay didn't hear, but I heard it." He goes, "Let me tell you." He said, "I've been around the globe." And he said, "I'm not afraid of any man." He said, "But whatever's in these woods," he said, "I'm not hunting here." And he left as we stood there and hooked his camper up and off he went. And, the significance of that is the day before deer season to us hunters is, man, I mean, it's epic. You look forward to it all year. And for him to just pull off like that, we knew something serious, something very abnormal to us at that point had taken place. And my dad couldn't place it. We talked about it a lot. And he was a great tracker. I'm a tracker. Uh, we didn't bother to go look. We just thought that it would show up, whatever it was. And we just kind of forgot about it at that point until a few years later. But that's what got us started.
Wow, that's amazing. Really, that just had to be quite a mystery to all of you.
Oh, yeah.
Not ever having heard this sound before, for it to be so strong and dynamic
Yes.
and to
Yes.
drive a hunter out of the woods. I grew up in the country too. I grew up with hunters, and yeah,
Yeah,
that first day of deer season is a pretty special day. You got your place picked out already.
it
You're
is.
going to get out there and get up in your tree or whatever, and you're
That's
ready to
right.
go. By the time that sun comes up, you've got yourself staked out.
Yeah. I want your viewers to know, a little bit about my background. I'm a pastor. I've pastored for 30 years. I was an operations manager for a city up in Ohio. My family's all from Kentucky, but I worked for 32 years there. I retired from there. I'm not embellishing this. This is all very real, and like I told the folks last night, Charlie last night, I'm a reality preacher. I get into the word. I'm an exegetical type of expositor, and so I deal in reality. I don't deal in the figment of my imagination. So the things that I'm going to tell you are real things. Okay, things that makes Sasquatch not hard to believe in. It's been reported on for so long, and people have reported on it throughout the ages. There's even cliff art, paintings on cliffs from hundreds and hundreds of years ago that portray this creature. And I'm not trying to convince myself or any of your viewers. I'm just telling you what the facts are. And
Exactly.
I'm being, there's
Yeah.
a difference between fantasy and faith.
Exactly.
Fantasy is
Yeah.
something that you want to believe in, but you think that it might not be, but you would listen. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things that are not seen.
Let's
I
get
use
back
this
to our
analogy a
Bigfoot
lot.
encounter. Let's get back to our Bigfoot encounter, or this Bigfoot
Yeah.
noise that you had, because that's what my audience will probably want to hear about.
Yeah.
So if we move back to that night, and you were how old at that time?
Um, roughly I was in my probably about 40, 35 or
40.
40 years old.
Okay, when that happened, you were when you were
Yes,
in the
when that
house
happened with
and
my
when your
dad.
dad was outside. Okay, so you're about 40
Yes.
years old. So you were a mature person, able to discern,
Oh, yeah,
very very
absolutely.
easily all things that were going on. So when your
Absolutely.
dad came in, I know that obviously he probably was expressing quite a bit of anxiety or tension at that point,
Oh,
especially
he
since he
was.
couldn't identify that. Do you remember anything else that the household responded to, or anything else he said?
Well, he kind of was wanting to go down and look for some tracks down in this. There's a big tract of land that's surrounded by cliffs where he could hear this thing originating from. And it's probably sound travels up these, we call them hollers, sound travels up these cliff valleys like crazy. And probably it was about maybe a quarter of a mile to a half a mile away down in one of our valleys in this cliff valley. And he was wanting to go down in there and track, but it was the beginning of hunting season, and we didn't want to be out there in anybody's way. And so we just kind of thought that we would leave it go and see what become of it and keep it in the back of our mind, track when we're out walking around when we are hunting, and then kind of let it go like that. And then the latter part the began to happen before I retired from the city up in Ohio, roughly 10 years ago. And that's when things become really intense. When we started really, I was spending a lot of time here, prepping the land, getting ready, to make things happen down here as far as where my home was going to be built. And so I was here a lot. And the very next thing that happened, if you want me to go that route,
let's go back and just kind of explore a little bit more of that night
Yeah,
that that incident happened. Did you ever see that guy again that was
never did.
camped out there?
He
I
never
that
come
was a
back.
curiosity of mine, is to know, was he so scared that he never even
He
returned?
never did come back, and he doesn't like, well, since then he's passed on, but he doesn't even like to talk. He didn't like to talk about it. He had nothing for it. Remained good friends, family friends, but absolutely in no shape, form, or fashion would he ever set foot on this place again.
Do you know if he was outside of that camper when he heard that sound, or was
He
he?
was. He
Okay.
was. He was
But
actually making his way down into the cliff pass, down into the cliffs when this thing let loose like it did. And he just turned around and hightailed it back to the camper and was kind of just waiting for some daylight the next day, as we believe is what he was doing. He never said that, but he was not moving. He was
yeah,
staying put.
he was going to stay until he felt like it was
He
safe
was
enough for him to
very
leave.
scared. Yes, he
Yeah,
was very, very
yeah.
terrified.
Well, it was probably a good thing that you all went down there and
Yeah,
gave him permission anyway to go in and leave
good
and
call on my
felt
dad's
safe.
part.
Safe.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was. It's a very good call. So he only heard the one time. That was it. Just that one time that
just
night.
one time.
Yeah.
Dad said it lasted for probably, if I remember correctly, around 10 seconds, 10 to 15 seconds.
Wow. That's
This
a good bit of
huge,
time. Really,
that's a
that's a
good bit
long
of
time.
time.
Yeah.
And he said it began, lasted for that period of time, and was just unlike anything you could ever hear. And mind you, we have no neighbors around here. So this isn't like our nearest neighbor is several miles from us. So it isn't like somebody could be doing something, close by us, because if you was able to see the lay of the land, there's nothing there. It's a very, very rugged place. It's so rugged, the Commonwealth, via GIS, looked at it and said it was an old growth timber area, almost like a virgin timber stand that had never been touched. And the only reason why is they couldn't get down in there. It's just the cliffs are so rugged and it's so hard that back in the day that nothing could be done back down in there. And that's where that sound was coming from. And there's a lot of caves there. As a matter of fact, there's one cave that I haven't been able to explore. It's about 25 or 30 feet up on the cliff face, but I could drive a pickup truck in it, and it goes back in further than I can see. So, uh, you know, there's so many places for a creature like this to be able to live, to hide, and to exist.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it's kind of an amazing thing. Now, your family had hunted this particular woods for years,
Oh,
is that
yes.
right? Yeah. So
Oh, yes.
with
Decades.
no problem, no incident of interference or no sounds, no Bigfoot anywhere around, no
No,
Sasquatch.
every hunter will tell you that they feel like they've been watched. I know I have, or if I'm walking in the dark, which is a very common thing in deer season, you're getting out before daylight. There's many, many, many times that me and my dad, my brothers have felt like something's been paralleling us. We didn't know what it was, couldn't see. You can barely see your hand in front of your face, but you could hear steps in the leaves, crunching in the leaves, and it's close by you. Or you have that, we all have that gift of, you've been sitting in a crowded room and you look left and somebody's staring at you. I don't know why we do that, how we do that. This innate thing that's within us that tells us something is there or something is happening. And you feel that, uh, you know, especially if you're sensitive to the woods and you're listening closely anyway, and you're in tune with what's going on around you, like me and my family are.
Yeah, and you're well familiar with the woods. So
Very much.
if there's something around, you probably have a more
We
intense
will know it.
awareness of it than like I would maybe if I were in the woods. So because you're really
Yes,
aware of
exactly.
it. So you went from that point to when did you begin to have any kind of other encounters or any other knowledge of this?
So several years went by, and nothing really of any particular significance happened. There were several occasions. My dad raised horses, and there were several different occasions where he had a big corral and a huge barn, and the horses would kind of go crazy, but nothing bad. Up to about 10 or so years ago, I came back down here And in these cliffs, there are several different places where the cliffs come to ground, as we say, and you can walk from the top land, go in between that break, and go down into the bottoms. And this is where all the game comes up and down at. So it's a very good hot spot to ambush a deer for a hunter or a Sasquatch, which wasn't paying no attention to this. So I was on my ATV. I was probably a mile or two from the house here in the woods in a very remote area that I really like to hunt, where there's not a lot of human activity ever. And there's a nice break in the cliffs right there. Well, when I went and I looked at this very epic game trail going down in between the cliffs, I noticed there was the main trunk stem of this pine tree was about 8, 9 inches in diameter, and it went up about 8 feet, but it was snapped like this, but it was still attached. And the top was laying about 30 feet to my right. But the thing that got me about this is when I looked down, I took off on my ATV and thought, what did I just see? And I backed up and then I looked up. And in that break, about 8 foot up, there's a deer head jammed on that break. A little basket rack, little 8-point buck just jammed in the point of that break. And this is very remote. I mean, there's been no storms, no nothing. And immediately my mind starts to wondering what has done this. So being a tracker, I can tell you that when a leaf falls from a tree, it'll go down like this and be cupped up typically and will land on the ground like this. And if anything touches that leaf, it'll bend it, so much as a mouse. Okay. So I thought, well, I'm going to see what did this. Well, there was no claw marks on the tree where maybe a bear went up or a cat went up with this. And it was jammed on there was the interesting thing. There's no footprints, there's no disturbance in the earth. The ground was really hard. It was very little rain. And I couldn't find any hair where this animal might have been killed nearby or at the base of this tree. There was no meat, no hair, no anything, no sign of anything. And I thought, what would this do this? I even went and asked my dad, who was like I told you, a very good tracker. And he said, he goes, I can't tell you what did that. He goes, if it was a bear, he goes, or even an eagle that would have grabbed something and a part of something that had been killed, he goes, it would have landed. There would have been something. There'd have been some disturbance. There'd have been hair down here at the base, nothing. And so the only thing I was able to see is a very disturbed game trail going down between these cliffs. And that's what spawned me to call the Kentucky Bigfoot Research Organization, in which I did. And they wanted to come out and take a look around. And when they did, that's when I really started learning what I was really dealing with here. And they kind of enlightened me to some things. I started learning some things. We built a fire. We did some tree knocks. We have vocalizations started to happen. And then all of a sudden, this thing starts to become, it comes forth from myth into reality, and that's how it began. And then from that point on to this, it's been nonstop.
Wow. So were a lot of those sounds that you were hearing and all the interaction, was that coming from that deep valley
Yes.
Okay, so that virgin kind of wooded area that nothing had really ever developed down there or even cut trees from that area to speak of?
That's correct. And all the other areas surrounding the Blackwater here forest is a lot the same way. It's not that virgin stuff or the old growth stuff, but it's a heavily traveled, even historic corridor of Native American activity, of game activity, of buffalo activity. This was a corridor that was traveled a lot, especially on a northward trek. So it's very significant.
Well, tell me from start to finish, all of the things that have happened to you since you started really exploring this.
Okay, so after this happened, and I even, and introducing my dad to this, we were very skeptical. We were like, well, cognitive dissonance kicking in, this just doesn't fit the Rolodex of what we know exists in this world. So thus it can't be. Well, so we thought. And so things began to happen. So as that day went, my stepmother my dad calls me very late one night. And this is not long after we did this exploration here when Charlie came and we did this. I get a call from my dad. The stepmother forgets to let the dog out, so they go out like midnight one night, and they come out here where currently my gate is at, and this thing goes off the deep end. The same noise that my dad heard in hunting season was the same noise that happened to my stepmother. Her and the dog both run in the house scared to death. And so dad says, "What is going on?" He said, "Never heard anything like this." He goes, there's no one out here. I'm 5 miles in the woods and there's nobody back here. And there's really only one way in and one way out because of the cliffs. So if anybody comes in here, they've got to be seen. So no one here. So I get a hold of Bob Gimlin, his phone number. I was lucky enough to be given his number, and I called him. And Bob, too, is a tribal member of a Native American tribe. He has heritage. And he says, "Do you know how to speak your language?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Have you ever drum and sang?" And I said, "Yes." But before this, he tells me, he said, "I want you to tell your dad to do something." I said, "Okay." He goes, "Where they last heard the creature, where they think it was at, he goes, go and tell him to take some cantaloupes and put out as a gift on the ground." He goes, "Do you think your dad would do that?" I said, "Man, I don't know. My dad was he was a man's man, kind of, so to speak." And, but I said, "I'll give it a whirl." So I call my dad and I tell him this. I said, "Dad, would you be willing to do that?" And he goes, "I'm willing to do about anything." He said, he goes, "As a matter of fact," he goes, "last night," he goes, "The horses were going crazy." And I forgot to tell this to Charlie, which I've told him privately. He goes out to check on the horses in the middle of the night, and something's heaving rocks. He knew it was rocks. There's no trees around, so it's not acorns or nothing like that. Rocks hitting the metal roof, rolling down and landing by him. He could see that it's a rock. He goes, "What is doing this?" And so he's very much willing to do about anything to find out. So he goes and he doesn't tell me, he doesn't tell anybody, and he goes and takes 3 big cantaloupes and puts them out where they thought this creature was at. And when they did this, he calls me back and says, "You are not going to believe this." I said, "What?" He said, "I went earlier today and put cantaloupes out the way Mr. Gimlin said to do." And he goes, "Jay, they're gone." I said, "What do you mean they're gone?" He said, "Something has picked them up and carried them off." He goes, "Now, Jay, you and I both know that if it's a deer eating these things, or a raccoon or a possum or whatever," he goes, "they're going to paw it, they're going to bite it, they're going to chew it, they're going to eat it right there and make a mess." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Something picked them up and took them." He said, "I can see the shine in the grass." In other words, something had walked and bent the grass over, and in the sunlight, that's how you track something's shine and shadow. He said, "I can see a disturbance." He said, "But I don't know what it was." I said, "Any aerial sign, anything high?" He said, "Not that I noticed." He said, "Something picked these things up." So we're in awe about this. So the very next morning, I was thinking about calling Bob again and letting him know, in which I did later on. But my dad calls me back and he goes, "My goodness," he goes, "you ain't going to believe this." And again, he was one of these straightforward kind of guys, right? And he says, one of the hulls of those cantaloupes, the outside skin of it, he goes, there was a hole in it about, a couple inches in diameter. And he said, it looks like something dug the guts out of this cantaloupe and put the hull back on my porch. He goes, "What's done this, Jay?" And I said, "It had to be something with thumbs. Would you not agree?" And he says, "Absolutely, I do believe that." He said, "I do believe it was something that could grip, something that could hold, something that was able to put something on the porch and not disturb anything else, not even our dog." So that was the next thing that happened. So I call Bob and tell him this, and Bob tells me, and he was gracious enough to talk to me. I don't want to make people think that he and I are these great friends or anything. I was just a person, an honest person asking honest questions, trying to figure out, is all this stuff just for people to make money with, or are these real creatures? Because we're having some serious activity go on. And he told me, he said, son, he goes, I want to tell you, he goes, this is absolutely real. He goes, I can tell you one exists. He said, because I looked at it on Bluff Creek. And he goes, I am not lying. He goes, I'm an old man. He goes, and I'm probably not long for this world. He goes, and if I was telling yarns, he said, I would tell you. He said, but I seen one. And he goes, and it sounds like these creatures are in your area and they're trying to make contact with you. He goes, for some reason over the years, we have found that they tend to have an affinity for Native American people or people with Native American heritage. And this is when he told me, he said, can you speak your language? And can you drum and sing? I said, "Yeah, absolutely. I do it all the time. I do it in the tri-state area. I said, yeah, I can do that. He said, well, try that and let me know how that goes. And so I come back down here. This is before I moved here, you know, and I come out here and I stand at the end of the house and or where my house is at now. We had just kind of moved here back then, and we had things were kind of in place, I should say. And I yelled out, Kiwakamile Nikanaki Hue She La She Mamo. And then pow across the hillside, a real loud, this is in the middle of the night. I don't remember exactly what time it was. It was very dark and very late. And then behind me over here across, there's a valley and a hill over here across from me. And then there's my house, and then there's a valley and a small mountain here. And I hear pow in the front of me. And then I think there might have been two or three pow, pow, pow behind me on another tree. Now I can tell you as a hunter and a woodsman that when coyotes hunt or when they're communicating, they'll howl and locate each other. And then this is how they find out where each other's at. I've since learned that primates do the same kind of thing. They'll knock on trees to locate each other in jungles or in forested areas and such. So I was very convinced at this time. I took my drum out and I sang pow, 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 when I would do this. And I said, enough said for me. So it keeps going on. I had a shoulder surgery before I retired. I'm sitting out here. I couldn't lay in the bed because of the rotator cuff surgery. It was just too painful. So I was sleeping in a recliner, and the house was just put in and we're just here. And I'm sitting in the recliner, and I had this big dog called a Presa Canario, and very much so a guardian breed. And he was a very good watchdog. And all of a sudden, very quiet night. It's very quiet in the house. A rock hits my window, and you know how it is when you can tell what something is. Uh, I heard it hit the window, pop, and then I had gravel for my driveway at that time. I hear pop, and as the rock hits the gravel, and my dog stands up, and he was probably 140 pounds. Very good watchdog, very brave. He growls a guttural growl and then climbs in my lap, scared to death. And so I tell my wife, I said, you got to come out here and I think we're having more encounters here. She goes, what happened? And I told her, and so help me, nearly the same minute, the same thing happens while she's out there with me at 2 o'clock or so in the morning. Rock hits the window, falls in the gravel. Dog stands up, growls, becomes very afraid. Same thing happened, almost like it was deja vu. And my wife looks at me and goes, oh my gosh, this is very real. So now we hear things hitting the house. It's not aggressive. We hear whoops. We hear the Sierra sounds that some of your listeners out there, you guys might be familiar with. I think his name's Ron Moorhead, who recorded these almost monkey sounds. And these are not barred owls, by the way. And we do have barred owls here. This was not barred owls. This was in our just maybe 50 yards in the woods here, which is probably about 50 yards from my house. We hear this, and we've heard this 3 or 4 or 5 times. The communication between these things. There's been that. My dad tragically died in a hay cutting accident here on my property in 2021. And Shawnee men always wore turkey feathers in their hair, and he was sure to wear turkey feathers on his straw hat when he was hay cutting and things, and he had that on. And when he passed, uh, one of those feathers was missing out of his hat, and that was picked up. I don't know if this is the same one or not, but the very next day when I had got home, I had just retired, and I was going to my son was doing cybersecurity in New Jersey for the Air Force. So I was wanting to go see him and see my grandkids. I turned around the next morning. I come out. There's a turkey feather that matches the kind of turkey feather he had in his hat at the very bottom of my steps, pushed about 5 inches down in this 57's gravel on my driveway, and it was pushed in. There was no falling. I mean, this thing, I've got a picture of it sticking straight up, pushed in. I think we left it there and it stayed there for 2 weeks or a month. And we never touched it. There was a communication made. We seen what happened. This is a memorial to him. Rocks on the tops of our tires underneath, very different flint rocks that don't look native to here or something. They look very odd on top of our tires underneath the wheel wells. I put stacks of rocks out in the forest and they manipulate them. There's no one here. There's nobody doing this. There's so many things like this. It's become so commonplace for my wife and I that it's a coexistence that we have. It's nothing dramatic anymore, you see.
I can see, and everything you're talking about is definitely high potential indicators because
Oh
those are
yeah,
the things that happen when you
yeah.
have a Sasquatch or Bigfoot on your property. So have you ever come close to actually seeing one? Have you laid eyes on?
Well, one, there was a footprint down near, there's a big waterfalls not far from my house. And there was a humongous footprint. And there was an expedition going on here and they were casting it. And lo and behold, somebody drives up in an ATV and squishes it. So everybody was just torn to pieces. Uh, just a week or two ago, the Kentucky Bigfoot Research Organization had an expedition here on my property. And my wife came out, and my daughter was here. My daughter, and I won't say where, she's a forensic interviewer, so she's a very analytical person, similar to my wife. And my wife goes out with the dog, and it was nighttime, and the expedition had been going on. Everybody was away from us. And I've got some ornamental grasses that stand. They're maybe 3 feet tall, next to the corner of my backyard fence, and I've got these round wood farm fence posts in. And I have livestock guardian dogs, and I've got an Anatolian Shepherd that's about 160 pounds back there, and I have a Great Pyrenees mix that's with him back there. And my wife goes around the side and happens to look over in the yard, and about the height of the post is probably 5 or 6 feet. And I have a light mounted to the top of it, a solar light. And she said, Jay, she goes, I come in and she goes, I seen one tonight. I said, well, what did you see? She said, I could clearly see it standing there. She said it was maybe a foot above, maybe the thing was 6.5, maybe 7 feet to the top. She was very hairy. She said I could see clearly what it was. She goes, so I went in and got Emily, my daughter, and come out and said, are you looking at what I'm looking at? And they both said yes. And they actually seen this creature twice. But when she went into the house and went through our house onto the back porch, she was in the front of the house at this time. From the back porch, you can look to the right and see that same post and that same area right there, and it was gone. And so twice this happened to both my daughter and my wife. Now I have not. I have not seen one. I think I've been close to them. Well, I know I've been close to them just by the noises that I'm hearing, but I would not say I would not say that I seen one unless I actually could tell I seen it. I don't believe in the blob squatches and all those things. If I'm going to see it, I'm going to see it. But I'm the type of person that, listen, nobody's ever seen the wind, but we've seen the evidence of it. I've felt it on my skin. I've seen it in the trees and the leaves. I don't really have to see to understand what's going on, but it would be fantastic to see it. And I suppose that probably I will, because I live in the woods. I live here in the woods, and there's activity around us all the time.
About how often do you have some type of interaction where you hear something, see
Several,
something? It's every
several
day,
times a week.
several
Several
times a
times
week.
a week.
That's
Mhm.
pretty often. And are there any odors? Do you smell anything with these creatures?
No, but I'll tell you, amazingly enough, there is other things. For instance, this place is very, it's an old place, right? I told Charlie this the other night. We're the only second family to own this in American history. It was given to the Sexton family for serving in the Revolutionary War as a land grant, and then my family bought it from them. And so it's an old land, an undisturbed land, so to speak. And I have a wild deer, and I call her Doreen, right? She'll come. I can call her. Typically, I can call her out of the woods. And now hunting season's coming on, and I haven't seen her in a few days, but she'll come up and visit with me. She'll come right up. She's took food out of my hand before. She loves grapes. And I've never tamed this deer. I didn't raise her from a baby. I didn't find her. She just come out of the woods one day. So it's very different. We've learned to live in the land and with the land, but it's kind of it's just become it's so weekly, so evident to us. My wife she'll hear a whoop. She goes, "Boy, did you hear that whoop tonight? That must have been a big squatch," kind of a thing. And you hear something so distinctive as whoop, like this. You There's nothing else makes that noise. What takes a baseball bat like sound and smashes a tree at 2 o'clock in the morning? It's not a tree breaking. It's not an acorn falling. It's not ice or something like this in the middle of the fall before anything's froze. And pow, it's not a breaking, falling tree. And then another response right behind you. It doesn't take much to begin to understand, okay, these are happening intentionally, and something's making these things happen. So this is how it is here.
Absolutely, yeah, I can see that. So are you still gifting at all? Is there still any kind of
We
process of
do. We do. There is one particular place that I'll put stuff out at, and then I won't go and check. I just leave it there. But I know when I come back, it's all gone. And I'm not trying to trick them. I'm not trying to catch them. I'm not trying to take pictures of them. I really enjoy them being around. And as much as I want to have something to show someone, and maybe someday I will, um, I think they understand that I don't do this for that purpose. But I love to tell people about them and the reality of them, you know, and how they react with me and my wife and my family. It's a wonderful thing. There was a man I was telling Charlie last night. A man training. He was getting ready to go into SEAL training, Navy SEAL training, and BUDS training, uh, which is like the very beginning of being a Navy SEAL. And he wanted to sharpen up on some of his. We also have a school here that trains wilderness survival and uh, search and rescue kind of things, tracking. We do trainings here. There's a school that operates here, and this guy met the instructor out here to kind of freshen up on compass work and navigation and nighttime navigation and things that he might be asked to do. And as they were sitting here in the driveway by the house, we were gone. Something's shaking trees back here, shaking them violently. And the instructor and I had conversations about what's going on here and what to watch out for. And and he was like, "Well," he goes, "let's just say we should probably leave." So they left right after that. So it's just all the time something,
Do you think these things were happening before and you were just unaware of them, not paying attention to them?
Possibly, uh, you know, you become desensitized to things that you're around a lot, right? Uh, in my line of work up north, it would be it would be very every day for me to jump out in a 4-lane highway, park in the median with my lights on my truck, jump out and remove something from the highway as cars are passing me 70 miles an hour, 4 feet from me. And I would not even think anything about that. And so you become desensitized to things that you're around a lot. And maybe that could be that we were just dismissing it for something else until we started really paying attention, and it started being a little bit more, I'm not going to say aggressive, but more pursuant of getting our attention.
Yeah, so why do you think they wanted to get your attention? What do you think is the psychology behind that? Their desire
I
to.
really don't know. I really don't. I know that I know that I'm a hunter. I'm a very much an outdoorsman, but I'm also a very much a conservationist. I take care of the land, and I don't abuse the land. And I think they're curious creatures. I think they're a primate sort of thing. I don't believe in the mysticism and the Nephilim. Even though I'm a preacher, they don't fit the characteristic of a Nephilim. But they, I think they're curious creatures just as much as we're curious of them. And I don't think there's a whole lot of them. And I think when you have a pocket like this, and they want to see what's going on, kind of a thing. That's what I think. The tapping on the house with, we can hear something just tap on the house like this in the middle of the night. Those kinds of things, being noticed at the corner of the yard. The whooping, they're like okay with me knowing they're here. Is what I feel.
Yeah, exactly. So the night that there was the window shaking sound, that was the first time that your awareness was really vividly attuned to what was going on here in this woods. And the new guy on the block, so to speak, was down in the camper, was going to hunt the next day. Do you think that something about him being there is what caused that earth-shattering sound from them?
Possibly there might have been young down in there.
Yeah.
And there's not been, it's so rugged. I have actually taken deer down in there. And let me tell you, it is hard to get them out, you know. And so I left it alone. And there are some places in the woods that I leave alone, especially birthing areas, place where I know it's bedding areas for the deer and for the animals, thick places they like to be. I don't mess with that. That's their place. And I exist outside of that. I'll hear the coyotes try to hunt them areas, but I leave those places alone. And that's one of those places that I typically leave alone. And I think him coming in there very well could have been an intrusion to them, or they might have had a young in there that they were trying to protect. So very well could have been that. Yes.
Yeah, because it seems kind of coincidental that he was down there camping and then you have this, this very
Yeah.
loud sound from them. Something
Yes.
did your father say if it sounded like they were angry or it
He
was it?
said no. He just said it was more kind of like roaring. He said, he goes, sounds like a man, but not a man. And he's like, I just can't place what this is. He goes, I've never heard this kind of a noise. And he goes, whatever it is has to have a huge set of lungs. He goes, there is no way. He goes, it literally shook the windows of this house. He goes, I can't believe you guys didn't hear it. And I said, I'm sorry. I said, I would have loved to have heard it. He said it was man-like, but not. And then it happens again, when she was letting the dog out. And so perhaps, perhaps it was a warning or a, you know, a stay out of here kind of a thing. You know, we've seen markings on trees, big slashes on trees that I'm not sure is a bear, but they were high up, you know, almost nail marks in beech trees that don't have, they're very smooth bark trees here. And I mean, humongous scratches and things that I can't say what that was. It could have been a cat, it could have been a bear, it could have been, or it could have been a Sasquatch. I don't know. Uh, but they're in that area.
Have you seen other structures, any of the, the X's or anything like that?
Yeah, some of the folks that's come here before, especially, I've seen a few, but they have marked and took pictures of some very nest-looking things. One in particular was the best I remembered. It was a bigger kind of a tree that had kind of fallen, and then it had all kinds of other stuff stacked around it. But you could tell something had been inside of these things that had been laid over the top of it. Um, there was that, and but on this property, there are so many caves, overhangs in the cliffs. We call them rock houses here, you know, from where my ancestors or these creatures could readily stay and be out of the rain. You know, there's, as I was telling those folks, there's three things that really makes this property attractive to something like this is it has cover, it has water, and it has food. So all these three things is what any of us needs to exist on a daily basis. And that's here in abundance on this property. And I'm very close to the Daniel Boone National Forest, which is, I forget how many thousands upon thousands of acres. It stretches across the state of Kentucky, top to bottom. So we're also very close to touching that. So there's just so much wooded area and so much protected, you know, areas that an animal like this could have protection, food, and water and stay like that and not be heard from.
Exactly. So when this incident first happened and you were reaching out, obviously just some people that you knew already had some knowledge about it, but were you talking to anyone that just didn't believe you or was kind of making fun of the whole thing? Because
Oh,
a
sure,
lot
yeah.
of people run into the ridicule.
Oh, yeah. And I'm okay with that. You know, I don't have to be right about everything, and I don't have to be, you know, I know what I know, you know, and I'm very sincere about that. And people that, and I have had that a lot, you know, people will say, "Well, have you seen any Bigfoots lately?" I said, "Well, why don't you come over and we'll look together," and then everyone will take you up on that. And I understand that. I get that. There are people out there who has a difficult believing really in much of anything, especially something of a mythological nature, you know, like this. And listen, I can't say anything negative about them because I was kind of there, and so was my wife. You know, especially my wife, probably more than me, who was very skeptical and like, that's just baloney. You know, there's no such thing as that. And then, but you know, when you see something and you experience something, it changes your way of thinking sometimes. You know,
Absolutely. Yeah.
people, yeah, I mean, it just seeing is believing and experiencing this, feeling this, being out here, uh, seeing the animal life act like they do and communing with the land that we're on. And I don't mean to sound like I'm worshiping anything, but I mean there is a coexistence that we have. Everything around me is a living thing, whether it's a tree or a blade of grass, and all the animals that inhabit the forest. We're all in this together out here, and I've learned that through my ancestry and through just being here. You know, there's a huge difference when you know we've become kind of dislodged and relocated from our roots, where long ago this is how we lived. You know, where before there was a Walmart and a Kroger and a mercantile, even the forest was your sustenance. And so, and you had to commune with the land. And that's what we've relearned to do a lot, you know. And there's just kind of this, I think everything coexists the way that it should here. and it's really a very neat thing.
Well, it sounds like you have developed a wonderful ability to have some kind of a connection with
Oh
them,
yeah.
and it sounds like that's
Oh yeah.
building stronger and stronger. So
Mhm.
maybe we can have you on later on and see where it's all going from there.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And it's, I don't press the issues with these creatures. I'm not trying to trick them. And I know that some people might think that that sounds crazy, but listen, if you were me and you were here and you were seeing what I'm seeing, you would believe. And I'm not trying to convince anyone. Honest, I'm not. I'm just being honest. I'm just a common man. And I live here in honesty with my wife. And in sincerity, we are here, and this is what happens. And
exactly.
it's incredible.
Well,
It's great.
I tend to believe you because I've done a lot of interviews and I think they're out there and people are seeing them, hearing them,
I think so
interacting
too.
with them. And one of these days, I think there will be some more definitive proof that people will not be able to deny that they do indeed exist. So I want to
Yeah.
thank you for joining the show. Really, this has
Oh,
been a
thank you for
fascinating
having me.
story. You have some wonderful information, and I hope the audience really takes it to heart and enjoys it thoroughly. So thank you so much, Jay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And I want to thank my audience also for watching the show. And please like, share, and subscribe.